Okay, right. We're going to have our talk in a minute, but before we did, I thought we'd just give a recap of the story of Daniel so far, especially for the children, because they haven't been in the services with us for the last 2 weeks, and we're in Daniel chapter 3 this week. So Daniel tells the story of 4 young teenagers, and they are taken from their home to another country. They're taken from Jerusalem, from their family, away from their parents, to Babylon. Their names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Why don't we call them the boys in Babylon? That's easier to say than all their names. Right, now I think later in our reading we've got some people who are going to play Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's their Babylonian names. Where are they? Can they come up? Here we go, here's one. Great, now we're told in Daniel that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are very handsome and clever, so they're very well cast this morning. Welcome. So they're taken from their homes in Jerusalem to a new city called Babylon. And Babylon is a bad place. It's a bad place. The people in Babylon didn't like God. They rebelled against God. It's an anti-God place. So the boys in Babylon, they're probably a bit nervous because they come from God's people, Jerusalem. But Babylon, it was a very advanced place. It was the most advanced place on earth in terms of engineering and architecture. So we've got lots of engineers in our church family. Maybe your mummy or dad is an engineer. You guys would have really loved Babylon because they really enjoyed mathematics. They knew Pythagoras' theorem way before Pythagoras did. They were really advanced. But anyway, our boys in Babylon, they arrive in Babylon, and the people in Babylon, they have a plan. They want to change our boys in Babylon to be Babylonians. Even though they're from Jerusalem, even though they're from God's people and they love God, Babylon wants to change them to be Babylonians. Now, by this point in chapter 3, the boys in Babylon, they've actually graduated Babylonian University and they have very important jobs in Babylon. They have money, they have status, maybe they've got families. And actually, Daniel, have we got a Daniel? Daniel Etoff, yeah, you're a Daniel. Okay, Daniel, you can come up. Daniel, who wrote the book late in his life, maybe when he was 80 or so, he's with the boys. But actually, Daniel's not in this chapter because he's somewhere else, so you can sit back down. Thanks, Daniel. Now, a couple more characters to introduce you to for chapter 3. There is a king in Babylon called Nebuchadnezzar. Where is King Nebuchadnezzar? Here he is, King Nebuchadnezzar. And he has some friends with him, some satraps, which is a type of governor, and other officials, so they can come up too, they can come and sit down. Okay, come and take your seats, satraps and advisors and officials and astrologers. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar, he was a different kind of king to the kings that we have today. When I say the word king, you probably think of King Charles or King Charles Spaniel or King Kong, but he's not like any of those kings. King Nebuchadnezzar was very powerful. He was so powerful, he could do whatever he wanted, and he was not a kind man. He was a very unkind man. And the satraps and the prefects, all these people down here, they were his officials, his governors, and they did what Nebuchadnezzar wanted. Right, so I think we're getting close to our reading. I'm going to hand back over to Susie.
So today our Bible reading drama is from Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So, the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed,
"Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace."
Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar,
"May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace." But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up.
Oh!
Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them,
"Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you have refused to obey my instruction? You've refused to serve my gods and worship the image of gold that I have set up?" Look. Now, listen. Boys, when you hear the sound of the horn, the harp, the zither, the lyre, the harp and the pipe and all other kinds of music, if you hear it and do bow down and worship, then very good, very good. However, if you do not worship it, you will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace, and no god of yours can rescue you from my hands.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him,
King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you would set up.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown in the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors,
Did we not throw 3 men into the blazing fire?
They replied,
Certainly, Your Majesty.
But look!
He said,
But look! There are 4 men walking around unbound and unharmed, and one of them looks like the son of the gods.
Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted,
Shadrach! Meshach! Abednego! Servants of the Most High God! Come out! Come here!
So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said,
Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for he has rescued them from the fire.
They
trusted in him, and they refused to obey the king's edict, and they were willing to give up their lives to not serve any other gods, but serve their own God. Therefore, I decree that everyone of every language and people, if they should say anything against their God, they'll be cut into pieces and their houses turned to rubble. For no God is able to save like this.
Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
Round of applause.
Well done. Okay, can I suggest that if you're a child and you have a kazoo, you give it to a grown-up next to you? Can you, everybody do that, please? Just give it to a grown-up. And grown-ups, try really hard not to blow on the kazoos for the next 10 minutes. That would be really helpful. Well done, everybody. Thank you so much for reading that so well. Okay, our talk this morning is going to be in 2 parts. So we're going to do a little bit now, and then we're going to have a song, and then another little bit afterwards. And so this first bit, we're going to think about what does Daniel want to say about God in this chapter 3 of his book. What does it mean? Now, one of the most important things that we're going to see in the next few minutes. Oops, other way around. There we go. There we go, the God who saves. That this chapter is about fake worship for a fake God versus real worship for a real God. Okay, so what's the first thing that Nebuchadnezzar does in the chapter? He makes a giant golden statue. Maybe it looks something like that. Or like this. We don't really know what it looked like, but it was made of gold, or at least historians say it was covered in gold. So it's quite helpful that actually this you can see that this is made of cardboard, because it probably wasn't actually made of solid gold. Let's see if that stands up. Okay, great. It was really big, the statue that Nebuchadnezzar made. It was as big as 2 buses stacked on top of each other. So really big, this huge statue. And then he says, bring me lots of important people. That was all the satraps, the governors, the prefects, the advisors, the treasurers. And then he wanted lots of musical instruments, didn't he? And over again, as Daniel's writing this book, he lists all the musical instruments every time and all the important people every time. He keeps repeating them. He wants us to know that Nebuchadnezzar, he got lots of important people and lots of musical instruments, and it's very important, isn't it, this big statue that he's made, and everybody needs to worship it. And he also said, if you don't worship it, if you don't bow down to the statue, what will happen? You'll be thrown into the fire. That is scary. And so what happened when he said that? Well, everybody bowed down to the statue, didn't they? Because they didn't want to be thrown into the fire. All the nations, people of every language, bowed down to the statue. But why are they falling down and worshipping the statue? Well, it's because they don't want to get thrown into the fire, isn't it? They don't want to get thrown into the fire. So it's not real worship, is it? It's fake worship, and it's fake worship for a fake God, because the statue isn't God, is it? It's just a statue that Nebuchadnezzar made. So every time Dan knocked down the statue, that was helpful, because that was on the words when he set it up. Nebuchadnezzar set it up, and that Daniel says that 9 times in this chapter. He set it up, 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 he set it up. He's making a very obvious point, isn't it? This is a fake God. Nebuchadnezzar made it. It's just a piece of metal. And it doesn't matter how many musical instruments you have or how many important people, it can't change the fact that this is a fake God. But there are 3 people who didn't worship the statue: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they were in real trouble with Nebuchadnezzar. And in verse 14 of our chapter, Nebuchadnezzar says, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you've not served my gods, or you will not worship the image of gold I've set up? If you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace." And now at the end of verse 15, this is a really important bit of the passage. "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Nebuchadnezzar saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if I throw you into this fire, there's no God here to save you. No one can save you. And the boys in Babylon, they say, if we are thrown into the burning furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know we will not serve your gods or the image of gold you have set up. And that right there is real worship for a real God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they know God. They know the real God. And so they say to the king, you can throw us into the fire, but our God is real, and he can save us. Our God doesn't need lots of important people and lots of instruments to be worshipped. We worship him anyway. He can do whatever he wants because he's real and he saves. And then when they say that to Nebuchadnezzar, he's so angry. He's really mad. And so he superheats the furnace. He makes it absolutely boiling hot. And he throws them in. But then in verse 24, Nebuchadnezzar sees who the real God is, doesn't he? King Nebuchadnezzar, he leapt to his feet and he says, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? And all his advisors said, yes, that's right. And he says, look, I see 4 men walking around in fire. And the 4th man looks like a son of the gods. So Nebuchadnezzar, he can't believe his eyes. He was so angry. But then in 1 minute, in 1 second, his anger disappears because he knows the boys in Babylon, they were telling the truth about God. He's real. He's not a fake God like this. He's a real God. He's a real God. He's a real Savior. And so we should really worship him and not anything else. And what's even more amazing is that they know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're standing in the furnace, but they're not alone in the furnace, are they? Not only are they saved from the furnace, but God sends an angel to be with them in the furnace. He sent an angel to protect them from the fire. And so Nebuchadnezzar then says, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. No other God can save in this way. God is real. He's the real God. He saves, and he is with us. Okay. Can I switch to this one? Can I switch to this one, Mark? Okay, right, good. Right, I have a question for the children. Children, if you found yourself in the jungle, alone in the jungle, and you couldn't get out, what's the first thing that you need to find in the jungle? Yes. Any ideas?
Fruit or food.
Ooh, fruit or food. Very good idea. Yes, you do need to find fruit or food. There's one thing that you need to find before that.
A shelter and water.
Shelter and water. Very good. Water is the thing that I'm thinking of. Thank you. Water is very important, isn't it? Now, the problem is if you are in the jungle and you want some water, you won't find water like this, will you? If you're in the jungle, you'll find water like this. This is fresh from the garden this morning. Now that's very difficult to drink, isn't it? It's very difficult to live off water like that. And so what you need is something like this. This is called a life straw, and it's a special tool that's designed so that you can survive in difficult places. You can live in places like the jungle because you can drink any kind of water. Wormy. That's a very special tool, isn't it? Because it helps you to live somewhere very difficult, like a jungle or a desert. Now, the book of Daniel is a bit like this. The book of Daniel is written to help us to live in a place that's difficult to live. It's written to help us live in a hostile environment. Because if you're one of God's people, being a Christian is hard sometimes, isn't it? It's hard to be a Christian because we might want to fit in with everybody else around us. Just like the boys in Babylon, Babylon was trying to turn them into Babylonians. We might want to fit in with the people around us, but God calls us to be different. Now, it's hard to be different. It's hard to stand up and be different. I'm sure it was hard for the boys in Babylon, wasn't it, to be different? It would have been much easier just to fall down and worship the statue. And so the question is, why? Now, if the boys in Babylon, can they come back up? Here they are, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Oh, actually, you guys can stand up. That's great. So the question is, why didn't you just fall down and worship the statue? Because that would have been much easier.
We can't abandon him for some statue, even though it would have been easier.
Right, you can't abandon God for some statue, even though it would have been easier?
It would have been easier, but only God is worth worshipping because he alone can save.
Only God is worth worshipping, so he alone can save.
And if we did, then the king and the Babylonians wouldn't have seen that God is the real God who saves in the fire, not a God who does nothing.
Thank you so much, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You guys can sit down. So did you hear that? Only God saves. Only God is real. And if they didn't do what they did, then all the people in Babylon wouldn't have known that only God can save. Now, if we are Christians today, we face situations that are a bit like this, don't we? At school, we might feel different to our friends. We might feel different because other people might go and play sport on Sunday morning or go to birthday parties, and we don't go, and that's hard. Even if we love church, it's hard to be different. It's hard to be left out. But Daniel says, God is real, and he's with us. He saves us, and he's with us especially if we're alone and left out. Or maybe we find it difficult because all our friends go on fancy holidays. And on Snapchat, they can see that we don't go on fancy holidays. We go to campsites in Wales. No offense to anyone that's Welsh, I love Wales. But it's hard to be different, isn't it? And we might find that difficult, that they can see that we're not doing what they're doing. But we can be brave. Just like Daniel is brave and his friends are brave, we can say to our friends, actually, my parents, they spend their money on other things because they're Christians. They give lots of money away, and so they don't want to spend it on fancy holidays. And maybe if we say that, God will do something amazing, and he'll show our friends that actually he's real and he saves. Or maybe for some of us adults, the problem is that we're worried about our career. And at work, we're worried about saying something that might make people think that we're dangerous or outdated. We're worried about our jobs. And Daniel and his friends, they were top-level civil servants. They were ruling the kingdom of Babylon. They had better jobs than all of us do. They were the real deal. And they put it all on the line because they believed God is real, he saves, he's with us. They refused to become Babylonians. They refused to compromise. And we shouldn't either. Maybe we're sitting and we've listened to the story and we're listening to these examples and we're thinking, actually, that's not my life. I don't get opportunities like this. My life's pretty comfortable. And maybe that's because actually we're still in chapter 1, if you remember that. We're eating the king's food. We've already gone along with the Babylonians. And if that's the case, then Daniel says to us, we need to stand up for Jesus and draw our lines. Daniel's written this as an example to help us to live for God, to help us to survive in hostile territory. Now, it's true that sometimes we might get burned. There are lots of examples of that in the Bible. But God will bring us through it. He is the God who saves, and he'll be waiting on the other side. If we want to see his salvation, we can't become Babylonians. I'm going to hand back over to Susie in a second, but let's pray first. Father in heaven, thank you for the example of Daniel and his friends who, even though they were in hostile territory, surrounded, they were faithful to you. And Lord, thank you for the promise of Daniel that you are a God who is real and you save and you are with us. Lord, I pray that we would know that, we would experience that personally, especially when we count the cost and stand for you in a way that makes our lives difficult. Amen.